Thank you. I would like to welcome you all to the communications meeting of the board, and without any hesitation, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Doug Young.
Thank you, Reverend Pollard. Good evening, folks. Just a couple of highlights to point out before we begin tonight's, the main portion of tonight's agenda. A few kind of recent highlights and updates around the district. This Thursday at Harrison, actually that's tomorrow, at 1 o'clock, we'll be hosting a ceremony that marks the LEED Gold certification for both of our high schools. And as you may recall, the district last year was one of the first 14 districts across the country to receive the U.S. Green Ribbon Award from the Department of Education for exemplary efforts to reduce environmental impact and utility costs. And this LEED Gold certification certainly goes right along with that honor, and we look forward to seeing folks tomorrow at Harriton. The Lower Merion and Harriton theater programs are getting ready to open their productions. On November 8th, Harriton's presentation of the Laramie Project opens, and on November 21st, Lower Merion will be opening their production of The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And if you haven't marked your calendars already, the Education Foundation of Lower Merion's 4th annual Trivia Night, it's the annual fall fundraiser, is Saturday, November 9th at the Kinwood Club at 7:30 p.m. It's a great event every year and an important fundraiser for a very important organization. One other thing that I wanted to let folks know, Harriton's Gems Not Genocide Club, which is the largest campus activity, actually. It's a service organization that's dedicated to the elimination of genocide worldwide, and they've been focused on a number of projects. They recently presented $8,000 to an organization called the Darfur Dream Team, and those funds will be used to buy school supplies for students in refugee camps in Chad. So a few things happening around the district. And now we're going to turn it over to our presentation on enrollment growth planning, and I'll turn the program over to Dr. McGinley.
Actually, it's to Vic Orlando.
My mistake, turning it over to Vic Orlando. And just a reminder, folks, we'll be going through a presentation portion of this program tonight, and then that'll be followed by a period of public comment. We'd ask, as per protocol, to please sign in with our board secretary, Denise LaPera, if you would like to speak on anything this evening. Thanks.
So tonight is our 11th meeting on this topic since the beginning of the school year, and both Mr. Orlando and Mr. Gadan are going to give an abbreviated presentation of what was presented on Monday evening. If you are looking for greater context, all of those meetings have been recorded and are or will be posted on the district website.
Okay, thank you, Dr. McGinley. So I'm going to go through, as Dr. McGinley said, a brief presentation on enrollment, and then Mr. Gadan is going to talk about the facilities consideration. Closer? Is that better? Okay. I just can't see the computer then. It's okay. This report here goes back almost a decade ago to the CAC report when they looked at high school enrollment. Just kind of note a couple things here about the chart. If you look in the 03-04 school year, the high school enrollment was 2,340 students, and it peaked, I guess, in the 06-07, a little bit over 2,500. And then the trend, according to the report, was there would be a decline in high school enrollment, just under 2,200 in the 2018-19 school year. This chart here, we took, in blue is the same chart that we just showed, and then we added a couple things. One is the red, which is the current or actual enrollment, and you can see it kind of trends the same way there for the first couple years, and then you can see how it goes below what the CAC and then eventually exceeds where the CAC says the enrollment is going to be. So in the 13-14 10th day enrollment, our high school enrollment is 2,485. The purple line there is the Dijon Healy projection, which goes out to 2021, 22, which is just around 3,200 students. This chart here just gives you an idea of some historical enrollment, how the district's been growing. If you look at the red line, the 2008-9 school year, the total enrollment for the district was 6,812 students. as of the 10th enrollment in the 13-14 school year, we are at 7,859, or a 1,047 student increase, or over 15% increase since the 8-9 school year. This chart here, you probably have seen this before with the multicolor chart. And here we're just trying to show you what a cohort has passed through various grades. So if you look at, I call it the tan, in the 0405 blocks, the third grade, which now is the 12th grade in this current school year. So we started with 463 students. They have progressed to over 600 students, or roughly a 31% increase. And you can see going up to the 4th grade this year, there's been double digits increases in our enrollment. The enrollment projections, and again, you've probably seen these charts before. We have the Dijon Healy original numbers, the first two lines, and then we looked at expanded choice with 60% of the choice students going to Harriton, 40% going to Lower Marion, and then a 50-50 split, and then 40% going to Harriton and a 60% going to Lower Marion. So you can see those numbers, how they trend through 14-15 through 21-22. And I'll turn over to Mr. Ganane to do facilities consideration.
You had done an analysis for us in the event that we postponed it for 2 years, beginning in, I think, 26-17. Can you possibly discuss that tonight?
Could we wait until?
Okay, I thought they were switching speakers. So that's
Okay, moving right along. Again, this is a summary and abbreviation of what you've seen before, and all the presentations done Monday night are posted on the website. So we talk about facilities. We're primarily talking about classrooms and parking and traffic. In order to analyze the classrooms, we looked at the highest projected enrollment for each one of our scenarios. That occurs in the year 21-22 because they're increasing all the way up through that point. So those are the highest projected enrollments for scenario 1, which is to maintain our current boundaries. Scenario 2, which is to implement the proposed choice area and the students split 50-50. Scenario 3 is to implement the choice area and the students split 40% to Harriton, 60% to Lower Marion. So we take the highest projected enrollment. We subtract from it the existing capacity of the high school, which is 1,400 students, and then we take that difference and divide it by 25 students per class and round up. So you can see that for every scenario, there's a certain number of classrooms we would have to add to each one of the high schools. So just briefly, the concept for adding on to Harriton on a permanent fashion would be to add on to the building in this area. This is immediately behind the building in the area of the fitness room and the locker rooms. This is the architect's concept for adding on. It would be an extension of our existing 3-story classroom wing. And the area that this sits in right now is outside the building. So it would join up against the building, and there would be a hallway, and on the other side of that hallway would be the existing fitness room. So for an option where we needed 10 classrooms, we would build these 3 stories. We would build 3 classrooms infilled over the fitness room. For an option where we only needed 5 classrooms, we would build 2 stories. We were asked to look at an option for building temporary classrooms, so we would come up with a building that looks like this, reminiscent of the old M building, which existed at Harriton from 03 to 09. This is the architect's layout on the field behind the building. Again, we're in the same part of the building here. Instead of adding directly onto the building, we're behind the building. And this is a 2-story structure, and each floor would have 2 science rooms and 3 regular classrooms. There will be some impact to playing fields. Moving over to the DAO, we know that the DAO is a 3-story structure. The first story consists of the Downs gym and 2 classrooms. Those spaces have already been renovated and are available and being used by the school district, or rather by the high school. The high school is holding PE classes in Downs gym. Looking at an option to renovate the 2nd and the 3rd floor, this would provide the most number of classrooms would provide the 16 that are required under scenario 3. And what you're seeing there is renovation that includes 4 science rooms on the 3rd floor. We did a smaller option. I'm not showing here. It's the same thing, but only fitting out 2 science rooms on the 3rd floor. This is what we call option 2, where we're just renovating the 2nd floor, provides 8 classrooms, of which 2 are science rooms. We were asked to look at a covered walkway. This is the architect's concept for a covered walkway between the existing high school and the DAO building, along with a cost estimate. This then is a summary of the classroom costs. So for scenario 1, that's status quo, where we make no change to attendance areas. On permanent construction at Harriton, we're looking at a total between the 2 schools of about $10.5 million. If we go with temporary construction at Harriton, it drops to just over $7 million. Moving on to scenario 2, the total with permanent construction is just under $9 million, and with permanent construction at Harriton, it's just over $7 million. If we then go to scenario 3, where the largest enrollment is at Lower Merion High School, we see that the cost is $5.22 million, and that's to renovate the 2nd and the 3rd floor of the DAO, providing more than 16 classrooms. There's only 1 classroom required at Harriton. We would not choose to add on to the building for a 1 classroom requirement. We would determine another way to meet that need. I'm going to move on now and talk about traffic and parking. And again, the details of the presentation Monday night are loaded up on the website. The township has the final authority, final decision on traffic and parking. We have conducted traffic and parking studies where we looked at what the existing conditions are, and then we projected forward using the various enrollments in the scenarios, as well as how background growth of the traffic in the community would affect it. And so we've come up with some conclusions based on that. Mr. Tavani talked about traffic. He did had a lot of diagrams and talked about traffic counts and turning movements and levels of service, et cetera. The bottom line is, as we look at these scenarios and project into the future, at either one of the schools, we're seeing only minor problems develop at certain intersections, and ones that can be corrected with some timing signal changes or with some other minor improvements. When we talk about parking, what Mr. Tavani did was to do a survey of our parking lots today, and then using that information, he projected it forward using the various enrollments from each one of the scenarios, and determined what the shortage may be in the future. So if we look at the scenarios, 3 scenarios, we can see that the projected parking requirement for the high schools is shown here. It's a deficit in most cases. So for example, under scenario 1, we would have a shortage of 56 spaces at Harriton, 29 at Lower Merion, et cetera. So we looked at various options for fulfilling those shortages, focusing in on the 2 worst case. Looking at Harriton here, there's a couple of options where we can add 20 spaces that are currently placed in reserve. We can add 19 spaces by reconfiguring bus parking, or we can add a parking deck over the teacher parking lot, or we could look to move buses from the site. So for scenario 1, we're going to have to look at either a parking deck or moving buses in order to meet a deficit that is as high as what you see there. Scenario 2 requires less additional parking. Scenario 3 is no additional parking at all. Looking then at Lower Merion, under scenario 1, we did identify a way to add 13 surface parking spaces to the site and stay within our impervious surface, but that's not going to meet our deficit as shown there. So what we looked at was a parking deck, a 1-level deck that would extend over where the buses are parked now and across the parking lot right next to it, providing us 78 additional spaces, or moving buses off the site. Under scenario 2, the requirements go up. We can still meet it by doing one of those 2 plans. If you look at scenario 3, it's just a little bit more than what we might get from the deck or moving the buses off, so we could combine the additional 13 spaces. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gannon and Mr. Orlando. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to the committee? Is there any school board member? Gary?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. In regard to the initiation in 2016, 2017, is it possible to do a presentation for the public to see how that would impact each of the two sites?
Yes.
Okay, and then the,
Well, wait a minute. Yes, the numbers that you've had for a few days, you want those numbers shown? When you talk about impact of two sites, you're talking about
Well,
numbers of students?
I guess the numbers that were provided show the growth in each of the two locations. That's what I'm talking about, in
Okay.
growth.
Which eventually leads to the worst-case scenario, one or the other.
Well, it tracks,
Right.
how
tracks the numbers
each of the sites
differently.
are impacted going forward.
Right.
If you
Mr.
delay-
Orlando's looking to
Okay,
show
then
show that electronically, but when you say the impact, at the end, there's X number of kids at one
Well,
school or the other.
I understand, but I
So
mean,
the
that's
impact in
word,
terms of
impact meaning number of
facilities.
students coming. I mean,
Okay. I
those
just
are
want
my
to be
words.
clear.
Didn't we see that Monday night?
No, we didn't
The
see it
board,
Monday night.
yes, the board saw it Monday night.
We saw it Monday
Yeah.
night, the public didn't see it Monday night.
Right. Often, data is requested by board members and is given by board members.
I understand, so I'm just asking that it then be made available for the public. And maybe at some point put on the website, so if anyone who's not in attendance would want to look at it or review it while they watch the tape, then they would have that opportunity. So as you're looking for that, I guess, Pat, I have a question regarding the parking. Pat? Yes. Okay. In the scenario one,
Do you want to come to the front table, Mr. Gannon?
So during, I'm going to pronounce his name, Frank's yeah, thank you. Frank's presentation, that I can pronounce, not his last name. He indicated that under scenario one, that there would be a need for an additional 56 parking spots at Harridan.
That's correct.
Okay, and you presented different scenarios. I think one that resulted in, I think a total of 39 spots with the cost of, you outlined it during your presentation on Monday, where you could draw lines or add parking, and that was at a cost, I think, of combined of $336,000, those two options. But then when you presented, you crossed it out. So the question I have, if you need 56 spots and you found an alternative that only costs $336,000 for 39 out of the 56, could some less expensive alternative be developed for those remaining 17 spots in lieu of having to build a parking garage?
That's entirely possible.
Okay. And I just, and during your presentation, when you spoke about the parking garage for Harridan on Monday, the size of the parking garage was going to be 82 spots. And we discussed that we only need 56. And I think your estimate was $20,000 per parking spot. So we get some sense how much, if we built a smaller.
Right, when we come to it, we determine we don't need as many, then we could build a smaller deck
Okay.
with a proportionally smaller cost.
Okay. And then the numbers that you presented for the two or the three options, scenarios, are not complete. There's still other numbers that we don't have at this point in time to get a final cost for each of the three scenarios? Or do you feel comfortable that you have all the costs from the township and both from the, I guess, the architects or the whoever you consulted for the other items?
Well, you mentioned that we could find a lower cost alternative to build additional spaces at Harridan. We didn't explore that because at Harridan, looking at what we have now, we're almost to the point where if we want more parking up there, even though we have a lot of space, we're into playing fields. So I'm not sure that...
I'm just repeating what your presentation had. You identified two locations that I think
I
the total...
did, adding to 39 spaces.
Correct. That's what I'm referring to. So then the 17
Have to go somewhere.
have to go somewhere.
have to go somewhere.
But it may not be necessary to build a parking garage at a cost of $2.4 million to accommodate the 17 additional
But it
spots.
may be necessary, not to spend $2.4 million, but it may be necessary to build a parking garage for the 17 cars, 17 spaces. And because we've been charged by the board to come up with what are the costs, what could we experience as costs in each of these scenarios, that's the reason why we added that cost. So 39 is not 56, 17 have to come from somewhere. There's some additional cost that could be a parking deck, that could encroach on fields or could create other impervious surface issues. We're giving you a number about a parking deck because that doesn't create impervious surface issues.
And the only point I'm raising is that it appeared, based on the way it was presented, that the two alternatives that total 336,000 were crossed out, which means that it was not going to be explored because of the 56 spots, and therefore the only
The reason they were crossed out is because they don't add to 56. That's simply
Okay.
the only reason. They
And
didn't
all
add
I'm-
to 56.
And the only point I'm raising is that another alternative perhaps could be developed, incorporating those two first steps that you identified, and a third one at a less cost than what a parking garage, or a smaller parking garage, to accommodate the remaining spots. That's the only point.
Can I ask for just a point of clarification related to Gary's question? The information we received around parking and traffic was based on our current bus situation, or the numbers of buses we think we're going to need based on the enrollment growth?
Our current allocation of buses.
Okay, so we still have to take into account,
Right.
Thank you.
If buses, we have limitations based on the approvals that we have for the high school,
Right.
so for parking buses at the high school sites. So even though we need more buses, we don't have an option of placing more
Right.
buses at either of the high school sites.
okay, thank you.
Just a couple questions. Just to piggyback on that, I think, Chris, you said we were looking at maybe needing 15 to 20 at the worst-case scenario?
Right. We already bought 4 in the last year, so we think
So
it's
it's like
15
15?
is the closer number, 15 additional buses.
So we'd need to find space for 15, provided we don't have to
We'd
move
need to-
buses off of the
Right.
either high school site.
Right, correct.
Okay. And this, for all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, for all of these parking scenarios, they're really based on the worst or the highest numbers that we have, which are
That's correct.
8 years from now.
That's correct.
So-
And if you
so-
remember Mr. Tavani's explanation of his methodology, that was also a very conservative estimate. In other words, it tended toward the worst case.
Right, right. So it's possible that, you know, to Gary's point, we may not need that extra whatever. We just don't know yet because we haven't even come close to reaching that critical point. But I guess my question is, do we have a sense of when the tipping point is for when we would have to make a decision regarding parking? Because at this point in time, even if we do choose to, decide to expand choice starting next year, we still don't know how the students will split between the two schools. We have some theories, we have some ideas, but we until we live it for a year or two, we're not going to know how they split. So, again, your scenario 3 assumes, the worst case scenario in terms of how many children or how many students choose LM. And so I guess my question is, do we have a sense of when the tipping point is? Like how many years out we think the tipping point might be
Okay, well,
before
in
we
the,
have to make a decision on parking?
In the report that Mr. Devaney gave us, he identified that parking was adequate from his evaluation
Right.
of our use, up to 1,450 students at either site.
Okay.
So that was the
Okay.
number that he gave us, the parking expert. That's not our number.
No, I
So
I understand.
if you look at that number in relation to the scenarios, then you can figure out where we get to a point where there has to be some additional parking created.
Okay, so in scenario 1, that's 1819 at Harriton. Did he say 1,400 at both?
1,450.
1,450 at both sites?
At both sites, that's what he
Okay.
said.
So then it would be 1718 at LM under scenario 1. It wouldn't, under scenario 2, it wouldn't be till 20, it would be 7 years out for Harriton. Okay, so we need to be thinking about this, we need to be planning for it, we need to be considering it, but at this point, regardless of what decision we make regarding choice, we don't need to commit any funds to this. Is that, am I correct about that?
That's correct. We were asked
No, I
last
understand what you were
May
asked.
to come up with, answer a lot of questions posed by the board about various things that could or might happen related to the projections that we've had. And that's the reason we expanded our time, and that's the reason we worked with people over the summer to be able to answer those questions.
Right, and I appreciate that. I mean,
Right.
I think that's wise. I mean, and I think it's good that we start planning now. But I'm also saying that it's difficult to make any firm commitment at this point because not only do we not know, although we will soon, what the decision is regarding choice, we also don't know how the numbers are going to split. So I'm just bringing that to people's attention that you know, in terms of the parking situation, you know, none of this is hard and fast. We also know that, you know, projections are just that, projections, and we don't know how those are going to play out. I also just want to, well, I guess I'll wait on the other thing. I'll wait.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Did I interrupt someone?
Thank you. To the point that projections are projections, and we're looking at 3 different scenarios. We have historical data. For a number of years, the entire eastern side of the district had the option of choice. And we have historical data. Can you remind us of what percentage of students from the eastern side of the district chose to go to Harriton historically?
I don't have that historical perspective. I can tell you that of the students who were at Welsh Valley, which is not the universe of students who go to Harriton, some other students
Some
go to
students
Harriton.
go from
Right, from
BC.
Ballackinwood. That 75% of the kids who had the option of selecting either high school or selecting Lower Merion. But as we pointed out in several meetings, that at that time, we had a very different set of classes, a very different set of after-school activities, and a very different set of sports activities. And that students could not enroll at Harriton with confidence that every AP class was available to them that was available at LM, or every honors level class, and that things, even in my first year here, there were things canceled like AP chemistry, major parts of our curriculum. We have fixed that. And when you select between those high schools now, you're selecting the same curriculum available at both locations,
I understand that, but
rather than agreeing to a subset of what Lower Merion had to offer.
So have we done any polling, though, of students and families who have students in the pipeline to see where they would opt to go if given the choice?
We give an 8th grade poll every year to the students who have choice at Welsh Valley, and 60% of them are selecting to go to Harriton now. So that's the polling data that we have, is 5 years of that, with 60% of the kids electing to go to Harriton.
Of the children in the choice zone?
Of
Or
the children in the walk zone.
In the walk zone?
Correct.
But in the expanded area, or in
No,
the...
we have not
in
done polling.
In the potential area that we are discussing for moving, for giving the option to go to Lower Merion, we have not looked at that or done any studies on how people would choose, even with the expanded curricular and co-curricular options at Harriton.
And because we don't know what percentage of kids will
Right.
elect each school, we've laid out a few different scenarios in our projections.
I understand that, but we haven't looked at least we haven't looked at, as a board and publicly, what it would look like if the historical data and were...
There's no conceivable way to think that it would revert to that. There's just none. Because what we have now is 2 high schools with comparable curricular offerings, and comparable after-school programs and comparable athletics. And what we have now is a robust Harriton High School, not half a high school, as it was before compared to LM.
I agree with
You
you.
know what,
but
I'm
what-
sorry, I have to interrupt here because I really take offense to the characterization that Harriton was half a high school. Harriton, I could remember having this conversation 6-8 years ago, madly defending Harriton as a great school, and everyone saying, oh, yeah, it is. And now we're talking in retrospect that it was half a school. And
I should not have said half a school, and I apologize. It was
Yeah.
half the size. And it was in an athletic conference that presented less opportunities for kids, travel challenges, and it was not of the same quality that it is today. That is different. There were a number of courses, and we have the list. It's pages and pages of courses that exist at Lower Merion and exist at Harriton today that did not exist at Harriton 6 years ago. So things are greatly different and greatly improved at Harriton. And I know many, many graduates had a wonderful experience from fine and dedicated teachers and recall that time very fondly. But in terms of the curriculum, it was not the same curriculum that Lower Merion offered, and it was not the same set of opportunities.
I appreciate that clarification. The thing that I want to emphasize is there's been discussion about whether the two schools need to be of equal size or not. And one thing that we have learned in the last 5 years is that bringing Harriton's numbers up equivalent to, not equal to, equivalent to Lower Merion's has had a significant impact on what we're able to offer the students there and what they're able to do. And the accessibility. I mean, there were a lot of things that were offered at Harriton, but it was difficult to get into them because they were singleton courses, et cetera. That continues the concern that if the two schools become significantly different in size, there's the potential to return to a significant difference in the offerings. It may not change. There may be a commitment by the board now to make sure that Harriton has offered everything in the numbers and availability that Lower Merion is. But if those numbers start to dip even a little bit, it's possible that we get back to the singleton courses and some of those issues. And so I just want to keep that in mind, that we went through a very, very painful redistricting process. And the purpose was to make sure that the two high schools were equivalent in size. They were not going to be exact. LM has a swimming pool, Harriton has the IB program. Any kid at Harriton can be on the swimming team and they swim in LM. Any kid from LM can go to Harriton for IB. The two schools are not exact, but there is equivalency now, much greater than it ever was before. But the point that I want to make on that is curriculum was not the only reason why students chose Lower Merion over Harriton. Lower Merion is closer to Suburban Square. So after school, you can walk to Suburban Square. Lower Merion is closer to Wynwood Shopping Center. After school, you can walk to Wynwood Shopping Center. Lower Merion is
No, they do.
They absolutely do. Lower Merion has this tremendous tradition with their boys basketball team. Not only does it support the young men who play on that team, but it supports a tremendous atmosphere in the school in the wintertime going to those games. There are kids that choose LM because they want to be a part of that whole concept of that big basketball energy program. It's a fabulous, fabulous thing, and I would never want to risk losing that. But in the same time, it's one of the factors that comes into play when children choose. So I think we just have to be thoughtful when we say that numbers are likely to play out one way or another. We really don't know at this point.
And I'd like to
Excuse me,
finish.
can we
Hold on, I'd
actually-
like to finish my point because I did have the floor at some point.
All right.
And my point is getting to some of the things that Diane talked to, and with all due respect, Dr. McGinley, I don't know that we can say that because we've done tremendous things academically and co-curricular-wise at Harriton that, again, would not have been possible without increasing the enrollment at Harriton. And even with all of that, I don't know that we can say that those are the factors that would drive students to Harriton when you look at factors of distance, convenience, and all of the things that we heard about when we were making the original decision in terms of how to populate both high schools. These are struggles that we have continuously just because of the nature of where the schools are located, and those factors haven't changed. And I don't know that we can presume that we will drive 60% of the students to Harriton if the choice is given. And I think we need to look at a broader spectrum of scenarios and the impact on both high schools.
Okay, I just want to point out, which I think my colleagues, I understand that, you had the previous redistricting, and the goal of the previous redistricting was to get kids to Harriton. But the current conditions have changed. And actually, the goal of the proposal is to get kids to Lower Merion. So the goal is to actually try and get more kids to Lower Merions if you agree with the assumptions around not building at Harriton and using existing resources at Lower Merion, which I realize that not everybody agrees with. But if you take the assumption of the proposal, the goal is to get kids over to Lower Merion. And so you need to increase those kids, and 60-40, if you look at the scenarios, which I don't have in front of me, actually you need to get enough kids over to Lower Merion that you don't have to build at Harriton, which gives you the third scenario. So it's a fundamental shift in the actual conditions on the ground, which is that your population is growing, that the population is, of this, in the enrollment study, that the actual enrollment numbers have been running 1% ahead so far, and therefore the policy goal is a different goal, which is, again, to actually get kids over to Lower Merion so you don't have to spend the money to add an additional building at Harriton when you have facilities that you can use by, instead of building, adding the upgrades that we need to grade. So it's like the argument is an argument around the previous conditions as opposed to the current conditions.
I guess when I look at the projections, I don't see the urgency that maybe you do. And even when the initiation at 2016, 2017, there's no urgency that we need to make this decision now. It's clear. Looking at the numbers, it doesn't tip until I think, I'm trying to figure 2018, 19. That's under the original, let me finish, I didn't interrupt you. You look at, even initiating it in the 2016, 17, they got 60-40, 40 going to Harriton, 60 going to Lower Merion. It doesn't tip over until 21, 22. So the urgency of what you're saying of moving kids here, I personally don't see. I do disagree. And the continued reference to this building as being a great alternative, I just don't, personally, I don't agree. It's an older building that we would have to make the fix up at a cost. And when I look at the alternative, and what is the alternative that was presented by the administration, is taking an addition, and it's almost like the last piece of a puzzle. It just fits in to the existing structure. It's fully integrated. There's no need for children to go inside or outside. Safety-wise, it makes, to me, a lot more sense, and just in terms of student flow, it makes a lot more sense. But even with that, nothing needs to be done at this point in time, and I guess I'm somewhat confused why why we need to make a decision at this point, because there's nothing that would indicate that even waiting the 2 years, based on the analysis that was given to us on Monday, that there is any great need to act immediately.
Gary, thank you so much. Thank everybody for your comments. One of the things, and you kept using the word urgency, and that's where we don't want to be, in a situation that's urgent. And when we talk about making changes now, it's so that we can see what we need and we go into it at a rate that we are able to do it without this urgency. We have the kids here, and now all of a sudden, snap, we have to do something. And so therefore, and the building is already being used. The building, when it was refurbished, was done so that classrooms would be available in the event that we needed to use them, and it's already being used.
Well, I just want to respond. Looking at the new scenario where we initiated in 2016, 2017, if you look at those numbers, we could hold off that 2-year period without the need to do anything. Harridan doesn't tip over, like I said, under the 60-40 to 21-22. In terms of this building, I guess my analogy would be what we did at Welsh Valley. We had a building that we could have used. So, we would have to refurbish it just like this building, and that would have been the St. Justin Church facility. But it didn't make sense. It made more sense to add an addition onto Welsh Valley because that was part of the existing structure. And with that in mind, I kind of see it's the same scenario here. To me, for the students' well-being, it makes more sense to allow them to be in a facility that is part of an existing structure and not have them go in and out, have to interrupt the school day by going from one building to another and back.
You obviously haven't been at Welsh Valley recently.
Well,
It's
I'm
very
talking,
different. It's very different. That's a very different scenario.
but I'm talking about what we chose to do at Welsh Valley. I mean,
What we chose to do at Welsh
St.
Valley
Justin.
was to build a new structure that connected parts of the building rather than use the existing church structure, because when we did the design work, we found that it cost way more to use the church structure. So while it was there, it cost a whole lot more to use it.
I don't want to
And I have to say, this repeated references to safety is a complete red herring, and I don't know how else to say it. You were on the board that approved the design of 2 high schools. They both have outdoor seating areas. We expect high school students to come in and out of the building all the time. Are we also going to eliminate the outdoor seating areas? Are we going to lock down the high schools? Because that's not the design of the high schools. And this building is in use every day. And you approved that at the time. So now to act like we can't have kids walking between 2 buildings that they already walk past and back and forth from every single day has nothing to do with the decision that the board needs to make.
well, I guess we do disagree on that.
Well, then the board should pass a resolution that we shut down the outside seating areas. If the rule that the board wants us to follow is keep the kids indoors, we should eliminate the outdoor seating areas.
Okay.
I don't want to get further on a tangent, but just there's no comparability between the St. Justin's Church, which is unsafe and asbestos-filled and all kinds of things, and this building, which was renovated at great expense as in a magnificent new building, not an old building. A historically accurate, but nonetheless beautiful new building. It's just no comparable.
Beautiful new building is an extreme, because this is an older building that, when you say refurbished, windows were put in, the minimum that was done, because, and you talk.
Okay, can I just say, magnificent new building suggests that we don't need any renovations. So if that were the case, we wouldn't have to do any renovations. But we're talking about $4.6 million worth of renovations.
May I
So I want to
ask-
get back to the point that I wanted to make before. And I want to respond to 2 things. One regards current conditions have changed. Current conditions have changed. The enrollments are up a little bit. They're not up enough to be a problem yet. That's that has not occurred yet. As a matter of fact, Harriton, last year was one student under the projection, which is an awesome, great projection. I mean, that's like right on the money. This year, it was under the projection by 5, which is still a great projection, but still 2 years of actually being under the projection. LM, on the other hand, last year was 6 students over the projection. This year, it was 14 students over the projection. So that's 1.1%. So it looks, and this is only 2 years of very, data. It's not enough to see a trend. But if one wants to extrapolate, it looks like the LM population is increasing faster than the Harriton population is without any changes. So that in itself has the potential to create a problem. To speak to Mrs. Pollard's comment about we don't want to do anything urgent, I agree with you completely. And the interesting thing about phasing in starting in 2016-17 instead of next year is we actually buy ourselves a couple of more years before each school tips over the 1,400. Mr. Orlando's numbers that he gave us on Monday night, I also crunched a bunch of numbers myself. I got very similar answers. At LM, it buys us a year, possibly 2. So that's more time to get the building ready for the additional students that would be coming. And at Harriton, it adds another year. So instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out, it's now 6 years out before the numbers tip. So by delaying it, those 2 years, we get a couple of extra years for planning so that we're not so urgent. Because if we do this right away and the kids choose Harriton at 40 and LM at 60, we only have 2 years before this building has to be renovated instead of 3 years. So we get extra time. We also get a couple more years to see if the trends are living up to what they're projected as. We get to find out whether, in fact, Harriton is increasing at the rate or is not. We get to see if Lower Merion is increasing faster than the rate, which it appears it might be. We get to find out whether the apartment buildings that have been approved and are starting to go through the land development process, which are all on the eastern side of the district, it'll give us time to see how those play out and whether we draw students from them. It will give us time to see whether the St. Justin's property is sold to single-family homes or some other mixed use, which may or may not draw students. If St. Charles, I keep saying St. Justin's. I'm getting my saints all mixed up. So if the property on City Ave sells to single-family homes, we're going to see a huge increase in the number of students on the eastern side of the district. If it doesn't, if it's commercial or some other use, then we won't. But the longer we wait, if we can, without creating a problem, the more opportunity we have to make smarter, better informed decisions, because we'll have cleaner numbers and more time to make our decisions.
The problem with your analysis, Diane, frankly, is that when you show the numbers, which I guess we're going to show soon, is that if we could wait until the last minute and we could redistrict. That's a possibility too, right? I mean, we don't have to do that. I'm saying you could do that.
Yeah, but there's no need.
I'm saying, but there's no need to do that. So, I mean, my preference would be not to redistrict, frankly, and to increase the number of kids over to Lower Merion through expanding choice, which takes nothing away from anyone and doesn't compel any group of kids to go to a different school, right? So by choosing that path, if that's what we choose, then we don't know how many kids are going to choose each way. That's the difficulty of doing it that way, is that you don't know how many kids will choose. And so if you look at those scenarios, which again, I don't have right in front of me, but part of the problem is if kids choose Harriton, more than they have historically done so in the past, which, you know, is a possibility since there are a lot of great things about Harriton, then you got a problem. You need more time to actually get the kids over to Lower Merion if that's the scenario that happens. So,
I don't understand where you're getting at. I'm looking at Vic's numbers. If this,
Yeah,
if
I
students,
looked at
if
Vic's
students
numbers also.
increase, if we expanded choice and 60%, we maintained that 60% of
Right.
students choosing Harriton.
Right.
Which is well beyond.
you go
our-
over 1,400.
You don't go over 1,400 until 18, 19.
But
It's
you
the
go
same
over
either
the
way.
point-
I'm looking at the wrong one. It's the same way. It's, you go over it in 18, 19, or you wait 2 years and you go over it in 18, 19. So
It
it's
depends on which scenario.
no, I'm looking
that's
at the
whole
worst
thing.
case scenario. I'm looking at the worst case scenario. If they choose, if we expand choice,
Right.
you can't tell me if we expanded choice with the you know the 20 or 30 people who have already come and said they want to be able to send their child to LM. If we expand choice, you can't tell me how LM is going to get fewer students. There's just no way. No way. And so expanding choice, the best case scenario we have, or the worst case, depending on your perspective, is that we expand choice and 60% of the students in the expanded choice go to Harriton. If that happens, it is the exact same year that Harriton tips over 1,400 than if we waited 2 years and got better numbers and a better sense of where
And
we
again,
were.
you've made the point, you actually don't know what the numbers are going to be, which is what you guys keep saying.
Right,
that
so
is
why
the
make a
problem.
decision based on numbers we don't know?
Because you know that if you start sooner rather than later, you'll be able to get the kids over. That is the issue, because the goal
know that.
is,
You still don't know. You're still assuming that students are going to choose one or the other. You're saying if we
well-
start sooner, they will, but if we start later, they won't.
no, if you start sooner, the goal for this policy solution is to actually get more kids to Lower Merion.
No, the goal is to get Harriton under 1,400.
Yes, by getting more kids over to Lower
By
Merion.
however we do it. I
Well,
mean,
exactly. I'm saying you could redistrict, but I'm saying that that's not what I would want to do.
Could I just make
yeah,
one
sure.
point? Whether the board decides to do this in 14 or 16, we still end up spending the money to renovate this building. Like all that stuff has to happen, all that parking stuff has to be
and that could
figured
very
out.
well be, but wouldn't it be
And
nice to be able to do that
so if it's
without
delayed-
kids on the floors below?
No, if it's delayed, we end up with more kids at LM.
No, if it's delayed, it's the same. It's the same year that the numbers balance, the numbers tip. Except that if we delay the start of redistricting of expanding choice by two years, the numbers at LM stay lower longer, which allows us to put fewer students in this building while we're renovating, if in fact we decide to renovate. And that protects the LM students from the construction.
It's installation of bathrooms and installation of HVAC work. It's not wholesale construction. We're not building a building. So it's not nearly as complicated as what we're doing at Penn Valley right now, next year, or at Gladwin where we're building with kids in the building. Because we're not building new rooms, we're not adding on to the building.
No, but we're tearing things out and we're putting up new things.
The
And
things are-
and we have construction workers in and out of the building, and we have
Correct.
dust, and we have containment, and we have all those
Right,
issues.
just
So-
as we have with our elementary schools.
Yes, but not by choice. I mean, if we could have done it without exposing our elementary schools to that, we would have. And what I'm saying is, if we can do this without exposing our high school students to it, I think we should try.
Okay, Lynn?
So under any projections or scenarios, no matter how they're split, Lower Merion exceeds the tipping point before Harriton consistently, and Lower Merion becomes overcrowded before Harriton consistently. And I come out of originally a healthcare background, and for me the analogy is like if you have two hospitals 4 miles apart, and one is projected to become overcrowded in 4 years, you start sending patients from that hospital to the one that's already overcrowded because you project that the first one's going to become overcrowded. So you're exacerbating the traffic, the overcrowding, and the congestion in the first facility more rapidly. You end up having to serve people lunch at 10:15 because your food service facilities can't accommodate everyone eating at a normal lunch hour. And then you have kids, not at the high school. And you have kids who don't get home until 9 o'clock. Their last meal was at 10:15 in the morning, and it's a problem to start. Why would you overcrowd one facility because you project that the other one eventually is going to have an overcrowding issue when you're putting more people in the one that's already overcrowded and congested and dealing with those issues? I don't know why you would accelerate that and exacerbate that before you have to. And it doesn't get to any need. We can do this in a way that doesn't create a panic or an urgency or anything else. We can do it in a way that's planful and that helps our high school students in both schools maximize their educational and co-curricular opportunities, and in a way that doesn't overly congest one facility at the expense of another.
Okay, I'm gonna ask for just one more from the board, and then I'm gonna open it up for public comment.
Okay.
And if you would like to speak, would you please come and sign up with Ms. LaPera, please? Marissa?
That was simply my comment that this is a communications committee meeting, and maybe the policy committee is the better place to have our policy deliberations and communications we should be hearing. I've been taking notes at all these meetings, hearing on what the public has to say.
This is a public hearing on the issue. So, I mean, I think it's important that the board weigh in on issues that they may have. So I do have another topic I'd like to explore, and in regards regardless of which alternative is adopted, how it's going to be paid for. Because the issue of fiscal responsibility was raised at the Wednesday night meeting in the auditorium, and I just want to go through it. I'm going to make some statements, Vic. If I'm incorrect, you'll let me know. So, and I've gone through this before, but I just want to go through it again. When we borrowed the funds, and there were two borrowings, I guess we haven't done the second one yet, to the $10 million for the current projects that we're undergoing. We borrowed the $10 million. It was structured so that only the interest portion of the $10 million borrowing would hit the operating statement, and that at some point in time, when other debt came off, the new debt would then take its place, so there would be a zero impact on the budget. I mean, is that how we did it?
We did a wraparound offerings, basically, as you're correct. We were paying interest, so there's a minimal impact to the general operating budget right now. And then you're correct, as principal payments in later years become extinguished, then the new principal gets paid in the later years, correct?
So the
That's what
only
we did in the
impact that's
first
going to
borrow.
occur on this budget is the interest that we're including in the budget. That's it. That's the only part. Of the $10 million, the only thing that's going to impact our budget is the interest related to that borrowing.
Just the financing of the construction costs. There'll be other
Okay.
potential
Well,
operational costs with staff that we've talked about
And then
that impact this budget.
And then my recollection was that for the $10 million borrowing, that the interest portion on an annual basis, I think, was $250,000, roughly. So, and the reason I'm raising this point is because right now, and it's far from complete in terms of what the cost of the two different projects is going to run, but the way the numbers were presented this evening, the delta between the Harridan project and the Lower Merion project is approximately $5 million, roughly. And
That's
if,
with that excluding parking costs, yeah.
let's focus on those numbers. I said they weren't complete. So assuming we borrow because I want to figure out what it's going to cost us as a district for the additional cost if we were to elect to build the addition at Harridan. So we're looking at a $5 million extra borrowing, correct? So if, and I know interest rates change, but if we're looking at $250,000 of interest on a $10 million, can you assume that roughly it'd be $125,000 on the additional $5 million that would hit the budget? Assuming that we do the same wraparound?
assuming if all the factors are exactly the same, correct. However, I look at the numbers and, you know, when the debt comes due in Act One, so all those could change it, but if I'm strictly looking at the same factors we had last time, yes, roughly that.
So I try to like figure out what tax impact an additional 125,000 would be on our budget. And I came to roughly around $4.60, not a month, not a day, a year. That's what the additional increase to the taxes would be, $4.60. So the only point I wish to make is that when people raise the issue of fiscal responsibility, they're focusing on the gross amount, the difference between the two the cost of the two projects. In reality, what impacts and some of the speakers at the meeting on Wednesday highlighted, they were concerned about how it would impact their taxes. And I always like to quantify what the impact's going to be. So it's roughly the $4.60 if we choose to go for what would, at this point in time, without all the other costs built in, the more expensive of the two alternatives.
That's correct as it relates to the interest. It leaves out the fact that you have to also pay back the principal, and that gets added into future budgets.
But in terms of the impact to the taxpayer.
Correct. The bigger impact.
The only impact is going to be the addition of the interest into the operating budget, because with the wraparound, the principal is just going to replace principal that expires.
Right, right. But there is an impact long term to get the principal repaid. And we've been clear with the board, you know, for the last over a year about what we see as the greater cost to the taxpayer, and that is staffing to accommodate this number of students. And we hire a great number of new staff members to accommodate the growth in students, and the larger cost, as we said about the elementary middle schools, is not the cost of construction. The larger cost is the ongoing cost of having enough teachers to teach the kids and having enough aides in the building and custodial people in the building and bus drivers. That's the much larger cost. And that no matter what the board does, that cost is coming.
I understand that, and we've been fortunate because we've been able to underspend what we budgeted over a 2-year period quite significantly and build up our fund balances. And I know portions have gone to construction. I think $5 million this past year, and $12 million I think was designated for PSERS. So I guess we could always move it around if we need it for something else. So you know, we had $17 million increase in our total fund balances, $5 million before you transfer it to the capital account. So to me, there's some of that wiggle room. And you know, the 125,000.
Right. So you're not suggesting we should overspend our budget. So I'll simply say you're welcome.
Well, and I don't think we should overtax our taxpayers too. So you're welcome too. So the impact of the 125,000 is I think it may be 0.03% to the budget. And when you look at our tax increase, which was 3.82%, it's minimal at best. That's the only point I want.
Thank you, Gary. Vic, did you have the question that Gary had asked before? Yes, please, before we open up.
I need this. I don't think so. Okay, let me just kind of explain what we have here. I'm sorry about it, doesn't quite fit on the screen. So the bottom chart here is the 14-15. You've seen this chart, and some of the expanded choice numbers are in the slide that we gave earlier. So I'll just kind of show you. And the yellows are expanded choice, 14-15 through 18-19, the bottom parts that are different. Than the initiated in the 16-17. So if you go to the top chart, which is initiated in the 16, and what I did is highlighted strictly the 3 years that are affected by expanded choice. Now the 14-15 and 15-16 aren't highlighted because that's not expanded choice. So even though it's labeled that, really the expanded choice we talked about is initiated in the 16-17 year. So when you look at the 16-17 school year, the 60-40 at Harrington, the number becomes 1,295, and then the 50-50, it's 1,264, then it's 1,234, and then when you get to the next year, it's 1,340, 1,295 in the 50-50, 1,250, and then 1,407, and then comes 1,354 and then 1,300. And then if you look at the 16-17, you have 1,433 at Lower Marrington, 1,464, 1,494, and then you can see how they change. So it is more students at Harrington and slightly less. Now, as you get through the latter 3 years, 1920 through 21-22, those numbers basically are the same. Because at that point in time, I call it the pre-expanded choice students in the 16-17 have graduated. So now you're back to the same factors when you get to the 19-20, the 20-21, and the 21-22 year if it was initiated in 14-15 or in 16-17.
Could we put these numbers and these projections up on the website, please?
Sure.
We do that after every public meeting. Everything we present, we post.
Okay,
What
so
meant is a contest.
can I just point something out just quickly? If you notice in the Harrington projections at the top, if you compare that yellow box to the yellow box below, with the exception of the 1407 in the top right-hand corner.
That's what I said.
All the numbers, yeah. And we've already discussed that if it's only 7 students, we'll find a way to make it work. So there's no difference whatsoever in Harrington. If you page down just a little bit so that the LM numbers are shown on both. Okay, so here, now you see a difference in where, if you look at 17-18, okay, and you compare it to the 17-18 below, then, or even 16-17 if it goes 40-60 in the bottom row, we're starting to see Harrington crowd earlier. I'm sorry, Lower Merion crowd earlier if we do the phase in sooner rather than waiting 2 years. So I'm sure it's, people's minds are swimming with numbers and it's kind of hard to compare. You really have to sit down and study them. But if you box them out, you'll see that by delaying choice, by delaying the expansion of the choice zone by 2 years, we're able to hold the crowding at LM down for a little bit longer before it tips over into more additional classroom use in this building.
I certainly agree with what you're saying about the numbers, but crowding is, I think, not what we're talking about. Okay. Wherever the board decides to put kids, and it's the board's decision, our plan is to accommodate those kids in the same way that we accommodate them today. Same class sizes, same kinds of opportunities. And yes, both high schools at some point will have to go to 4 lunches, and some of those things will happen. That's going to happen if the numbers play out. But in terms of one being crowded, one growing slower, one growing faster is the right way to describe it. As far as crowded or overcrowded, what we would do at either school, if the board keeps the current boundaries in place, then at Harrington we would build more rooms, and so we're not trying to crowd them in.
So the proper terminology would be the time in which we need to expand out of the existing Lower Merion building into this building.
Correct.
Comes sooner. If we
Yeah, I just don't.
redistrict. Yes, no, I understand that. I understand that.
And in fact, as I said, if you go up to the later one, it does make a difference in terms of the 60-40, 50-50.
1 year, 7 students.
From 14,
1 year, 7 students. That's all. Just 1 year, 7
from
students.
1387 to 1407, correct?
1407 compared to 1387.
Yeah.
So
But-
14
and
is
then
our,
if you look
14
at-
is our threshold.
Right, and then if you look at the next year, after you follow those numbers.
It's the same in
it's-
both.
Correct.
It's, right, and it's getting, because you've already added in, it gets greater. So the question is, again, I think that, the point I made earlier when I correctly remembered the numbers was what I was trying to say, which is that the sooner you do it, because you don't actually know what the numbers is, the better off you are. And obviously, we disagree on that, which is fine.
Thank you, Vic.
You're welcome.
And now, again, if there is anyone in the audience who would like to comment on what we've done, please sign up with Ms. LaPera, and you have 3 minutes. The first one person that signed up, you may begin speaking.
Whenever you, do you want me to start? Dr. Clark? Okay. Good evening. My name is Todd Sinai, and I live in Marion Station. To revise this a little bit, based on the discussion, currently Harriton is under capacity at 1,185 students, and Lower Marion has 1,300 students. And that enrollment gap is actually projected to widen over the next 2 years before it starts contracting after that, and most of the contraction happens in 2018. So expanding choice now exacerbates that enrollment gap at Lower Marion. What does it forces immediate and I guess urgent renovation of the DAO when there's still plenty of capacity at Harriton. If you wait 2 years and then do the phasing of expanded choices, as you have been discussing, starting in 2016, or adding capacity at Harriton, what you do is you match the timing of the solution with the timing of the problem, which happens 2 years from now. It's not happening next year. It would use the current full capacity of Harriton, and it wouldn't need to touch the DAO till 2017. And you can see that in the charts I passed around. The solid lines are a 2014 implementation. The dashed lines are a 2016 start date. Starting the phase-in in 2016 minimizes the difference in enrollments between the two high schools. Starting in 2016 defers renovating the DAO. And starting in 2016 avoids having Harriton's enrollment fall below 1,150 students. And starting in 2016 is just as effective as starting in 2014 and not exceeding Harriton's capacity. And that side is a 25-75 scenario. The other side is the 60-40 scenario that the district prefers. In that case as well, the 2016 start date is better. I take Dr. Gilbert's point that maybe you want to consider, I guess, a 75-25 scenario, in which case you also do want to consider a 25-75 scenario. We really don't know in either direction which way things are going to go. And once you get into the extremes, the policy gets into trouble, and I'll have a little more to say about that in a bit. In the numbers that got presented tonight, which I just saw, I will say one thing about that one cell with a 1,407. The only reason you get above 1,400 there is this BC adjustment of 16 students that came from no consultant, has changed 3 times since September 12th. And if you actually implement it, it actually makes the DeJong-Healy projections of the current year way off. So I'm going to stick with the consultant's projections rather than doing that, and that's the reason that you get 1,407 in just that one cell. It's not even a full classroom, right? That's what Mr. Ganan said. We weren't even going to bother change the enrollments for less than a full classroom. Weighting gives the school district more information on actual enrollments rather than relying on projections. You've been focusing on the risk of choice. The bigger risk is the uncertainty surrounding the accuracy of the projections. It takes a very little change in projection, in the accuracy of the projection relative to its forecast, to get either Lower Merion over 1,800 or Harriton under 1,150, you should do a sensitivity analysis about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Yeah, I'm Aaron. I support the giving back choice. I wonder if, you know what? I wish that the people in this room can feel how I feel right now. Because I wish you would just make your decision. Because what you're doing is affecting my community. And you sit there and, oh, what's the big deal? I live in a community of minorities, and you're dealing with my kids, that you're just treating them like cattle. Oh, we're gonna put you over here. We're not gonna, no, we're gonna move, we're gonna give you choice. No, we're not. We're gonna take it away. We're gonna do this. I wish you can feel how I feel right now. And you sitting up here talking about, oh, the number. I wish you could feel if you had children that lived in my community that they just move around like they're nothing. But that's all right with y'all. I wish you could feel the way I feel right now.
Thank you. The next person?
Mr. Murphy?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'm Kevin Murphy. I'm president of the Federation of Civic Associations of Lower Merion and Narberth. I'm here tonight to read a resolution of the Federation, which has been supported by a majority of the member of civic associations at the time of our voting closing 2 days ago. According to the Federation bylaws, I must inform you, though, it was not unanimous, and I will tell you which civics are in favor and which are not in favor after the resolution is read. The resolution is as follows. The Federation of Civic Associations of Lower Merion and Narberth asks the Lower Merion School District to wait 2 years before deciding on any change to the choice zone. This will enable the school district to get a better handle on cost, equal education, parking, and enrollment data. Okay. The civics that voted in favor of this resolution were the Neighborhood Club of Ballackinwood, Merion Civic Association, Merion Park, Gladwin, Shortridge, Wynwood, and North Ardmore voted in support of the 2-year delay on construction. Voting against were Bryn Mawr, Belmont Hills, Ardwood, and about 4.5 hours ago, Narberth, and about a half an hour ago, Ardmore Progressive. The civics that did not vote either way were Penn Wynne, Haverford, Penn Valley, and Rosemont Villanova. Thank you.
Are you leaving a copy of that with us, or?
I'll get it sent.
Thank you.
Good evening, Dan DeQuella, Wynwood Civic Association, and I do concur that Wynwood did support that resolution, but due to the timing and other things going on, the new data that came out last Wednesday, a lot of good information, Wynwood continued to develop and work and try to figure out what is a potential alternative. So we have come up with an alternative resolution, which I will give you copies of. And I'll try to read it quickly. A lot of words. So, whereas the Lower Merion School Board of Directors is considering a proposal to expand the choice zone for Lower Merion High School to include all areas that prior to the fall of 2009 had been districted to Lower Merion High School, but as a result of 2009 redistricting were then assigned to Harriton High School. Whereas the Lower Merion Board of School Directors accepted a Community Advisory Committee report in 2004 recommending that 2 high schools of equal size with equal curriculum be built. Whereas the Lower Merion School Board of Directors approved and built 2 new high schools for 1,250 students with a maximum capacity of 1,400 students based on the CAC recommendation. Whereas the Lower Merion School Board of Directors in 2009 adopted redistricting Plan 3R that assigned a portion of South Ardmore students to Harridan High School from Lower Merion High School, a neighborhood school to which they could walk, and denied that part of South Ardmore high school choice when all other areas of Ardmore were assigned to it or had choice to choose to attend Lower Merion High School. Whereas Lower Merion School District has projected a large growth in student enrollment over the next 8 years, such that both schools are projected to exceed the maximum capacity of 1,400 students. Whereas the Lower Merion School Board of Directors will vote on November 18th, 2013, to expand the high school choice zone to enable population of Lower Merion High School to grow to 1,800 students while limiting the student population at Harridan High School to 1,400. Now, therefore, the Wynwood Civic Association hereby resolves 2 points. 1, to request the Lower Merion School District and Lower Merion School Board Directors to wait 2 years before deciding on full expansion of the choice zones so that the school district can obtain the best data on costs, impacts to equal education at both high schools, parking, and enrollment statistics, as such data will provide guidance on the most fiscally and educationally responsible way to move forward. And 2, consider for the school year beginning September 2014 to restore choice to the areas of South Ardmore that had choice taken away as a result of the 2009 redistricting. To reiterate the benefits of the resolution, the fractured high school zoning of South Ardmore is rectified. Making use of existing classrooms in DAO provides more than 2 years to evaluate the growth projections and construction options and planning. And finally, we believe this results in a more fiscally responsible decision on construction at one or both high schools to facilitate the projected spike in population growth of the high schools. Thank you for listening.
Sir, can I just ask a clarification? Because I'm just a little confused. So your association voted to support the civic
Yeah.
and this, or does one cancel out the other? I'm just trying
Well,
to.
no, because it was the timing. The Federation started working on their resolution 2 weeks ago.
contradictory.
We got agreement on that, and in the meantime, we were preparing a second one, not knowing if the first one was coming, but this is, so we support both. The second one was, I think.
The second one is the more recent
More
one now.
recent, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Brandsma?
Hi, I'm Lynn Brandsma. I live in Ardmore. I just want to make a couple of points, and mainly in response to a couple things people said. And I believe it was Ms. Kugel that asked if anyone had done any kind of poll or any kind of needs assessment with any of the kids at Welsh Valley that would choose if you were to expand the choice. I have. I did that last year. Just as I did 5, 6, how many years ago was it, with redistricting. Anything that happens to anyone's child happens to my child. And so I went out and I asked how people felt, what the impact was. And I did that again. And I took the Welsh Valley directory and I called. And I found one student who would choose to go to Lower Merion last year. I have not found any yet this year. And I know most of the ones coming up. My son is in that grade. We live in the walk zone, by the way. And the reason that I can tell you, I guess, a little bit about what they said when I called. And that was, oh, would we get to choose like BC? And, oh, wow. I would really like to choose, but I would choose Harridan. Which brings me to my next point, that I heard Ms. de Bonaventura say that people, the 20 or 30 people that came, wanted their kids to go to Lower Merion. That is not true. That is not true at all. I think people are up here asking for a choice. And that choice to go to Harridan is so important. They are not here saying, I want to send my kids to LM. And if that's what you heard, you need to listen again. Because they said, I would like a choice. Because it makes a difference when you are sending a 9th grader to go to Harridan who has that choice versus someone who does not. It makes a difference in how they perform. It makes a difference in how they feel. And you add race to that equation, and it makes a huge difference. And we all know that that's in there. The other thing I want to say is we talked about expanding the choice, I'd like you to consider the walk zone. Just as I go and ask people how they are impacted, I've asked people about that walk zone. Why is it 1 mile? Why is it 1.6 miles? Why is it 1.2 miles? Why is it a half mile into South Ardmore? And the answers I got are appalling. It's the 50th year of the integration, whatever. It's time to fix that. It changed in the late 60s because the people that live in my neighborhood did not want the African American children from South Ardmore walking through their neighborhood. That is why, at least that is perception, and perception is reality. It is time to change that.
No time remaining.
Hi, my name, can you, wait, hold on. Do I have all my time? Okay. My name is Marie Beresford, and I live in Ardmore. And I'm up here. First, I'd like to say thank you. There are a lot of new people here tonight, but as you all know, this conversation has been going on for a very long time. And a lot of data has been presented, and you have attended many, many meetings. I support expanding choice. I think that you've laid out the case, the administration has laid out the case, and I think it's the right thing to do. I'm also a parent of 2 children in the district, 7th and 8th graders at Welsh Valley. And I would really appreciate the conversation to refocus on the curriculum and those kind of issues. And I think that that is exactly what we sacrifice if we put this off for another 2 years. The community will fight about it again, and everyone will be on different sides, and I think that a decision needs to be made so that we can move forward with educating the kids. We have an incredible superintendent, an incredible new assistant superintendent who were brought in, quite frankly, to educate our kids. And as a parent, I would really like us to get to that part of your work. So thank you.
Good evening, Joel Johnson. I live in Ardmore. I support expanding choice as well, and I would echo what Ms. Beresford just said, but put a slightly different twist on it, in that I very much value the transparency that this board has brought to this process. And I think Dr. Gilbert made an important point that throughout all this process, we're not talking about compelling any students to do anything. Right? This is about choice. And what Ms. Brandsma said about the ability to have that choice is remarkable. And what Mr. Williams said about how people in my community and his community, we're neighbors, feel, I think has value. I think it was very powerful what he said. So I'd like to point out that a previous board made a decision to compel students to a new high school. And during that public process, they held 4 meetings and presented effectively 4 different plans to compel students. This board is taking the approach to not compel students, and by my count, I think we'll have a total of 24 meetings, public meetings, talking about this topic. So I applaud the transparency and the deliberative nature in which you've approached your work. I guess my other primary point this evening is I just, sitting here and listening through many of these 21 meetings so far on this topic, I just can't quite understand the fear, is what it sounds like to me. People are scared that there's going to be more kids at Lower Merion. Well, we don't know the numbers, we know the projections and this and that, and we go through all these acrobatics about, I think, Mr. Freelander, you're right. It's a valuable point. It's a very valid point. It's a minor tax increase on families relative to the cost difference. You're absolutely right. But still, it's more money. It's spending more money that we don't need to spend to solve the problem without compelling students to do anything. I mean, it just seems so sort of basic to me. I guess I'm really struggling to understand why there's so much opposition to this plan that would not compel anyone to do anything. It's more environmentally responsible, it's more socially responsible, and it's more fiscally responsible. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Corey Stema, and I really wanted to echo what a lot of my neighbors in Ardmore are saying here. I have 3 children in the district. I have 2 children that are in what I call the shrunken choice zone that attend Lower Merion High School, and I would want to say that I have no fears of overcrowding. I welcome allowing my neighbors to choose where they want to go. And I also just really want to appreciate the work that this board has done to have these discussions. And for all the reasons that we said before, I don't think there's any reason to wait. And I also think that part of educating our children is thinking about morality and ethics and the equitable distribution of burdens and benefits. And with all the fiscally responsible reasons for doing this and the environmental reasons and the health reasons to allow children to walk, it's also okay for us to think about rectifying a mistake or rectifying wounds that were opened in this community by the previous redistricting. And I think it's okay for us to consider that, and that we should consider that. And we have a welcome opportunity with no harm done to anybody to do that, and we should do that. And thank you for considering this decision.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gordon?
Hugh Gordon, I live on Landfair Road down the block from here. Had a lot of discussions in our North Ardmore neighborhood over the last 10 days about this. And there are a couple of principles that there seems to be virtual unanimity on. One is that an injustice was done to the people of South Ardmore with the redistricting, and we would like to see that remedied. We would like to see it remedied as quickly as possible. Second, the controversy over the expanded zones, choice zone or walk zone, whichever it is clouding the argument about the merits of doing construction and expanding the capacity of Lower Merion High School to 1,800. And our difficulty is that the numbers are extremely squishy. And it's clear that to make construction plans based on projections going into 2021 is ridiculous, based on the historical record of enrollment patterns in the school district. It's not a very good way to plan. There's no reason why you can't be much more flexible about planning for increased enrollments. My view is that not enough consideration has been done to trying to maintain equal size at the 2 schools. There seems to have been a leap to the conclusion that because this building exists, that this must be the way expansion goes. Don't see why that has to be the case. Don't necessarily see why all improvements have to be permanent and expensive, whereas modular, temporary classrooms to accommodate growth and shrinkage of school enrollments, which has historically been the case, shouldn't be considered. So, my personal view is I'd like to see the choice zone instituted immediately. And this would give you another data point that you could work off of instead of all the speculation about how many would choose which school. And we get it off the table, and you could have a discussion about the merits of the different school sizes independent of this very emotionally charged issue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Spear?
Hi, my name's Jim Spear. I live in Narberth. I could have talked on any number of of points made tonight. But I wanted to mention, I guess what I really want to mention is that we really need to consider is that we're talking about children here. We're not talking about numbers. And I get uncomfortable every time we're talking about moving kids around like they're numbers. Someone mentioned cattle earlier. I don't, I'm uncomfortable by that. I think there is benefit to acting sooner rather than later that hasn't been mentioned or hasn't been mentioned enough, and that's for the very benefits mentioned by some of the board here tonight, is that there are advantages of going to a school that's nearby you. You can choose it for environmental reasons, you can choose it for social reasons, but I think to single out a group of kids who could easily walk to Lower Merion and tell them they can't it's harmful to them, and putting it off another 2 years is harming another 2 years of 2 class sizes worth of kids, and it's denying 2 more years the benefits of making those choices, whatever their choice is. And I think it's also it's denying the property values in Ardmore from realizing their full value by virtue of living near a school and not being able to attend it. I'd like that to be thought about a little bit, because I think there's a lot sort of keeping a lid on these neighborhoods from blossoming into their full potential as full partners in the school district. And I think the board seems to be right on course to making that whole again. If I could do it my way, I would restore the choice to the proposed area immediately, try it out for a couple years, and bring choice district-wide, because I think there'll be nothing but benefit the more choice there is. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parra? That's it. I thank you all for coming to the meeting tonight, and all of the things that we've been discussing is on our website, and you have an opportunity to just review it and see where we have come from and where we are at the moment. The next communications meeting will be on Wednesday, November the 20th at 8:30 a.m. And with that, we are adjourned.